Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. All 50 states and the territories have their initial proposals in for BEAD. Some of them are wanting to categorize fixed wireless as something other than served, underserved, and in one case, unserved. Be right back with more. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. So again, all the states now have their initial proposals in Volume 1 and Volume 2. And I saw this story in Broadband Breakfast here, draft BEAD plans looking to mark some fixed wireless underserved. It mentions here Ohio's move was blocked by the NTIA, but Vermont's and Georgia's survived edits from the agency. So, fixed wireless has been a bit controversial as to whether, this should be considered reliable broadband or certain types should be considered reliable broadband, because there's a concern that if fixed wireless is considered reliable broadband, and it is now, but maybe not in the future, then that will leave some people out in the cold later, because will be considered reliable broadband and BEAD funding will not be available there. And therefore, we may miss out on some fiber that could be deployed there. But then again, it's important to have fixed wireless as an option in a lot of areas, especially for states that are seeking out funds, but realize, we're not going to have enough money to put fiber everywhere. We're going to have to do fixed wireless in places. Other states, and I think Georgia is one of them, if I remember, feel like they have enough money to maybe cover everywhere with fiber, or at least it looked that way. I think when I was looking at some analysis, I can't remember if it was from the state of Georgia or others, but so it's going to be dependent upon the state and how much money they're getting through BEAD, based on what they think the lay of the land is. And then there's different types of fixed wireless and providers that are going to be playing into this. So I was going to take a look at this story. So you see here, 10 states included plans in their draft broadband and their draft BEAD proposals to make more licensed fixed wireless service areas eligible for subsidized infrastructure by categorizing them as or underserved. So that makes the difference right there. If you say an area is unserved, then that would mean it doesn't even get 25 by 3. There's no reliable broadband at all there. Or underserved would mean that somebody there says they can provide 100 by 20, but that's kind of your second tier of locations that you're going to go after. So if it's unserved, you go to those first, then you move to underserved. The $42.5 billion Broadband Expansion Program's rules mark the fixed wireless technology as reliable broadband service, meaning areas receiving home internet on licensed spectrum are only by default eligible for BEAD-funded infrastructure if speeds are below the program's minimum threshold of 100 by 20. The states and territories were required to submit initial proposals for implementing the program to the federal government by December 27th, so we've now passed that and everybody's made that. The states consistently cite concerns about wireless networks' ability to handle large numbers of users at once, particularly in the case of broadband provided with excess capacity on networks designed for mobile use, as those networks prioritize mobile users during periods of congestion. And that is a big concern, because again, providers like T-Mobile and Verizon, mobile is their bread and butter. That's where they get most of their revenue, and they do not want to make their mobile customers mad by having them have access issues if they get a lot of fixed wireless customers on their service. So that's a concern. Right now they're saying, you can go out and I can order T-Mobile here in my area, and I just checked just a minute ago. I can order T-Mobile in the area. It says here that my address is eligible, but notice it says spots are limited. Who says that? If you're going to go order broadband from AT&T or your local fiber provider or your local cable operator, doesn't say, sign up now because spots are limited. No, they want to sign everybody up, and if they get too many customers, I shouldn't say too many, if they get a certain number of customers and they need to expand their network, they expand their network. They just add more fiber, they add more cable plant, whatever they need to do. They increase their capacity, and then they capacity up to the backbone, whatever they need to do, the size of their equipment. Whereas with fixed wireless spectrum, it's kind of a limited resource, so they only have so much spectrum, and that's the concern, that somebody like maybe T-Mobile can sign people up here in this area, and then suddenly they don't have enough spectrum to serve other customers. So if T-Mobile was the only option here in my area, then I would I would feel bad if I suddenly could not get broadband and I needed it. So that's the issue there. And by the way, this is what we're talking about as far as reliable broadband. This is from the Notice of Funding Opportunity. You see here, reliable broadband service. That term means broadband service that the broadband data maps show is accessible to a location, and that would be the FCC map, via fiber optic technology, cable modem, HFC technology, digital subscriber line, DSL technology. Surprising, but yes, but it has to, and again, it has to meet that 100 by 20 minimum, which is, for DSL, generally is not the case. Or terrestrial fixed wireless technology, utilizing entirely licensed spectrum or utilizing a hybrid of licensed and unlicensed spectrum. Now, generally, these fixed wireless providers, or I should say the mobile providers doing fixed wireless like T-Mobile and Verizon are using licensed spectrum, 100% licensed. So it really does fall in that area of being reliable broadband when looking at the NOFO. Then you see down here, just another page, it says, for purposes of the BEAD program, locations served exclusively by satellite, services using entirely unlicensed spectrum, or a technology not specified by the Commission for purposes of the broadband data maps do not meet criteria for reliable broadband service and so will be considered unserved. But again, you can't say that T-Mobile or Verizon would be unserved, and even somebody using CBRS spectrum, which is according to the FCC and was clarified later in a fact sheet, is considered licensed by rule, because with CBRS spectrum you've got two types of licenses. You've got priority access licenses, which would be where an operator buys licenses, they own those licenses, or you have general access authorization where it's not licensed in the sense that you as a provider do not need to purchase those licenses, but you do need to register the fact that you're going to be using those general access, general authorization licenses. And then that's all done through a sharing mechanism through CBRS, through a database and sensing of who is using the spectrum and automatically shifting these GAA licenses to other spectrum if somebody is using that, like a priority access license, or an incumbent like the military, like the Navy. So if a Navy ship comes into the harbor, then suddenly they're using that spectrum. They get complete priority over anybody. That includes priority access licenses, I believe, as well as the general authorized access licenses. So there's a sharing mechanism there, and that is all considered licensed by rule and all considered reliable broadband. If you were going to be using that, if an operator were going to use CBRS spectrum in the area, that would be considered reliable broadband. So let's see what we got here. So the states consistently cite concerns, I mentioned that, mobile users and congestion. As additional customers are added and subtracted from fixed wireless networks, the amount of available bandwidth per customer varies, Rob Fish, Deputy Director of the Vermont Community Broadband Board, said in an email. A particular fixed wireless customer could receive 100 by 20 or better during 1 month and then no longer be able to receive that speed in another month as customers are added. That's true as you add customers, just like anything like satellite or even fiber for that matter. I mean, again, as you add customers to your network, you have to make sure that you've got enough bandwidth back to the back, enough backbone, basically bandwidth to be able to handle that. So you've got to grow your network as you do that, but that's more of a challenge if you're talking again about a limited resource like spectrum. And it could again be that the provider realizes, we can't take any more customers right now because we've got too many. We've got all of our mobile customers, plus we've got a certain number of fixed wireless customers now, and we can't really risk taking on more customers. So that's a serious situation if that's the only provider around that can provide the broadband service, and suddenly they got to say, we can't take anymore because we don't have enough spectrum to do it. States with initial drafts marking some wireless broadband underserved. So 4 states, Georgia, Michigan, Mississippi, and Vermont, published initial drafts of those plans that would mark areas whose only internet comes from wireless broadband on cellular networks as underserved, making them eligible for BEAD-funded infrastructure. So again, you got those 4 states there, and this is not saying all fixed wireless. It's saying those that are on cellular networks, and again, these would be networks where they're doing both mobile and fixed wireless, and mobile being their priority customers. North Carolina's plan Draft plan would set homes and businesses receiving service from the technology to unserved, putting them at the front of the line for BEAD-funded infrastructure. So these other 4 states were saying underserved, meaning that we're going to look at our unserved locations, and then after that we go to underserved. And they're saying if it's fixed wireless like a T-Mobile, and again, here in Georgia, that's where I am. You saw that T-Mobile will take an order here where I live, but they say get it while you can, may not be available forever. Well, that would be considered underserved in Georgia, whereas North Carolina is saying would be unserved. And again, here by default, locations at less than 25 by 3 are unserved, and those that are 100 by 20 underserved. With unserved getting special priority. So again, that would mean that, again, in Georgia, it's kind of the next step, whereas in North Carolina, they're saying immediately these guys would be considered unserved, so they would be eligible to get some of the first BEAD dollars going out. The state's draft would also mark as unserved locations connected via general access license in the CBRS band. That's the license I was talking about, where while it's not a purchase license, it is a license. You do have a general authorization license, general access license there. 3 other states, Ohio, Nevada, and Wisconsin, plan to extend the underserved designation to locations receiving fixed wireless broadband on licensed spectrum, including networks specifically designed for home broadband. And I'm not sure the difference there, unless they're saying this is anybody, not just mobile operators. But really, that's what I'm seeing here with North Carolina, is anybody, not necessarily mobile operators. And they're calling it unserved, whereas these guys are calling it underserved, Ohio, Nevada, and Wisconsin. California published a draft plan that would modify locations receiving licensed fixed wireless at speeds on the lower end of the underserved range, moving them into the unserved category. New Mexico did the same, but only if the service is provided by cellular networks. So if it's a fixed wireless in California, it doesn't matter what kind. If it's close to that 100 by 20, even if it's set 100 by 20, they're saying, we're going to call it unserved because it's too close. It's right on the cusp. New Mexico, they're saying if it's a mobile carrier, then we're going to do that same thing. No drafts, including these measures, have been officially approved by the NTIA. States are allowed to modify the designation of certain locations, provided they justify them with sufficient evidence, according to NTIA policy notice. And it mentions here, Ohio's plan to designate all fixed wireless unserved was scrapped. The agency scrapped Ohio's plan to designate all licensed fixed wireless as unserved, citing inconsistency with the BEAD definition of reliable broadband, which I showed you earlier. A revision in the state's BEAD draft acknowledges that the NTIA informed the state broadband office that categorizing the technologies unserved would breach the rules laid out in NTIA's NOFO. Vermont and Georgia's plans to mark as underserved wireless broadband on cellular networks, however, survived NTIA edits to their draft proposals. Both state offices said they submitted proposals including the measure. I believe we made a convincing case and are expecting final approval any day on our Volume 1 proposal, Fish said. Who is Fish? I must have just read that and missed it. Are we concerned that it could still be rejected? Yes, of course, but we firmly believe we proved our case and believe the NTIA shares our desire to avoid declaring a mission accomplished and then having people come out of the woodwork saying they are unserved, and that's the concern with some of the licensed spectrum. Even if it's licensed, is there enough of it? The fear that some homes and businesses in Vermont receiving cellular fixed wireless at reported speeds above the minimum BEAD threshold may turn out to lack consistent internet comes from concerns about the capacity on those networks and the state's geography. So Vermont is kind of a special case, being very mountainous and remote. The state, 78% of which is covered in heavy tree canopy, incorporated into its BEAD plan a line of sight analysis to demonstrate potential obstructions to radio signals necessary for fixed wireless. The analysis reveals 1,108 locations lack visibility to any towers and therefore would experience diminished service for a significant portion of the year. So that's true where things change there as you've got winter and line of sight, and then suddenly everything blooms and you don't. Those factors can amount to inconsistent wireless service in Vermont. The state's broadband office said in its draft proposal, it cites 2,464 challenges submitted as of 2023 to FCC coverage data for the state's biggest cellular fixed wireless provider, over 2/3 of which were upheld. Georgia Broadband Office shares Vermont's concerns. Jessica Simmons, she's the executive director of our broadband office here in Georgia, said that the state shares some of Vermont's concerns about broadband provided on cellular networks. This is a good technology, it's just a capacity concern, she said. With home internet users and mobile users competing, it can be difficult for all locations within range of a cellular network to consistently connect on its excuse me on its excess bandwidth. Georgia plans to mark homes and businesses served only by the technology as underserved. That's an effort to make sure that those locations are being marked as those locations that are being marked as served can actually get access that they requested, she said. Simmons said the NTIA requested additional information on why the state felt it necessary to make the change. The measure survived edits from the agency, but has not yet to be officially approved. So, again, the NTIA hasn't come out and said you can't do that, but they haven't officially approved it yet. So I guess we'll be waiting to see what happens there. The NTIA did not respond to a request for comment. Republican lawmakers at a House oversight hearing in December pushed Alan Davidson, the agency's top official, on state plans to open up more wireless broadband service to areas to BEAD infrastructure. They expressed concerns that such plans would lead to states subsidizing networks in areas that already receive adequate internet. Pardon me, had the flu. Just getting over it. So right there, their concern is that if you do have areas that can get broadband today, and again, these would be areas that are getting fixed wireless, whether it's through a cellular network or not, and they do have access to service over 100 by 20, then you're funding, basically you're overbuilding in a sense, or funding an area that already has good broadband service. But again, there's a concern that, will those areas be able to get additional subscribers online in the future? Representative Tim Walberg, a Republican from Michigan, said he was very concerned about his state's draft proposal, which would mark locations receiving cellular fixed wireless as underserved, and asked Davidson to commit to rejecting the plan. I can't really answer the question. Pardon me. Can't really answer the question without seeing sort of the totality of what they're proposing and what their state will be working on, Davidson said at the hearing. I will say there are good reasons states have tried in some situations to work within the statute to make these changes as they go through their own challenge process and figure out where they're going to spend the money that we've given them, he said. So you can see, there is good reason that the states are doing this, and it's against the states that feel like they have enough money, maybe in some of these areas where they've already got, it says fixed wireless is there, especially, let's say, mobile cellular fixed wireless that would be covering everybody, but the states feel like they've got enough money to build fiber in those areas. That's, I think, why they're doing that. If the state is struggling and they don't think they're going to have enough money, then they're probably they're not worrying so much about this right now. They're worrying about how they're going to get fiber wherever they can. And I think every state, like I mentioned, every state sees fixed wireless as important in certain areas. I mean, I suppose there could be a couple of states that say, we can do fiber everywhere. But there are just going to be some really really expensive areas that are going to be either very remote, challenging as far as geography, that fixed wireless will be appropriate. So it's going to depend on the state, how much money they're getting, and those kinds of things. So fixed wireless, I think we'll be seeing it at BEAD, but the question is how much and what kind of leeway the NTIA is going to give the states to be able to maybe recategorize some of this, again, to make sure that, the goal is to make sure everybody gets reliable broadband, but also future-proof reliable broadband as much as possible. So if you don't want anything standing in the way of an area that could get fiber to not get fiber. And then what you've got is, you may have some competition then. So you've got some fixed wireless that's already there. Let's say T-Mobile or Verizon's covering an area with their 5G service, and then fiber gets in there as well. Then you've got multiple operators, which can help with pricing as well as some redundancy. And again, if for some reason the spectrum becomes a challenge as far as congested, then you've got that fiber there, and you don't have customers stranded. So that's the goal. So I think everybody's trying to balance as best they can what's best for the internet subscribers. I know it, though, is frustrating especially for independent fixed wireless operators who've really gone out on a limb, put their own investment out there to be able to provide broadband in a service area that hasn't had it. Spent a lot of money, a lot of time, and now they're concerned that they're going to get federal dollars funding somebody else to provide service in an area that they're now covering. So I know that's an issue and a frustration for them. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button and ring the bell and you'll be notified when I'm live. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. I'd appreciate it. See you next time. Bye-bye.